Welcome to Snippets of Wisdom with your host, Dr. Mike Corral and Dr. Michael J. Murphy. Snippets of Wisdom is the boomer's gift to the next generation and to the world at large. Dr. Michael J. Murphy and Coach Dr. Mike Corral are experienced psychotherapists, writers, and healers who find the greatest satisfaction in sharing the benefits of a lifetime of struggle and learning. Coach Mike has spent decades spreading deep wisdom and supporting youth through the juvenile justice system. Dr. Michael has directed mental health services at many correctional centers and testified in countless trials as an expert in sex-related issues and mental illness. And he was one of the 500,000 humans at Woodstock. So now, please welcome the hosts of Snippets of Wisdom.
And welcome to Snippets of Wisdom. I'm Dr. Mike Corral, with me co-host Dr. Michael Murphy, and we are here to offer you another excellent show today. Today we're going to be talking about something really, really special and something that you probably have not heard of. We're talking about living your obituary. That's right, living your obituary before it's written. Dr. Murphy, tell me about how does this feel like to you hearing this?
One of the things that I think is central, and it's great to be with you all again today, and I'm just really looking forward to this conversation, which really brings forward, some of the fundamental um, issues of life and meaning and purpose, because that's it. I mean, when you think about your obituary and what you want it to be, and we'll be talking about this whole process, which really is a therapeutic process in detail, it is that we are required to come to the realization that this incarnation that we call life apparently is not endless. I mean, it's funny, some people say, well, I've heard that everybody has to pass on at some point, but maybe I'm the exception. You know, maybe I get to live eternally, and maybe we do. We don't really know that for a fact, but uh, there is this thing called the big D, and after that, we're supposed to change in form in some way. And so at the period that occurs, ostensibly, we sort of have a summary of our lives, and we call that our obituary. And maybe someone will make that statement, maybe somebody will ask us to do it for ourselves. And so today we're taking the opportunity to start to think about that now, to understand that um, we can play a very powerful role in influencing how we want to be remembered in terms of what we want to have contributed to this life and this world. So that's our topic for today, and we're going to get deep into it.
Yeah, baby boomers are not unfamiliar with the idea of preparing your getting your affairs together, so to speak, writing your will and getting things ready for that ultimate day. But nobody ever talks about, have you written your obituary? I mean, it's like almost as if it's not our responsibility to write our obituary. But let's take the opportunity to reframe this whole thing. What if reframing the obituary would cause it to be like a living compass for us all? What if by writing our obituary, we get to plan what people say about us, or the memory that we leave behind? That's one thing that we know can be eternal. When you think about how we remember some people, like Methuselah, the guy who lived like 900 years in the Bible, somebody wrote about him, and somebody else told that story, and somebody else told that story. And now one of the things that we know about Methuselah is that he lived a really, really long time, you know. And he was in charge of that memory for us all. And we're talking thousands of years later. But just to give people an idea of what it's like, uh, what it would be like if we decided we're going to do this. Um, what if the obituary isn't about death at all? I mean, what if it's a mirror of how we're living right now? What are your thoughts, Dr. Murphy?
Exactly. I mean, it's the concept of an active obituary, a dynamic obituary. I mean, an ongoing obituary that evolves over time, that as we understand how we want our life to have been lived and how we want to be remembered, that will be something that will change over the course of our lifetime, necessarily because we'll be doing different things, hopefully, and accomplishing different things each day of our lives. So I think to think of the obituary not as a static thing that happens at the end of our life, but as an active thing that we need to choose to author as we go forward on our life. I mean, each day we can wake up and say, how would I like to have this day be remembered as a part of my life? How would I like to have have others be affected by whatever I accomplish on this day? And so that's a real conscious burden, the conscious dynamic obituary. And what do
Yeah,
we want to think about in terms of how we create that over the course of our lifetime? And there's no
yeah,
better time to start than now, right?
true.
So, yeah.
I don't know about you, but I have been to a lot of funerals in my lifetime, and I've actually been to funerals that were really sadder than uh, you would want, because at the moment when they ask people to get up and say something, I've been to funerals where there was nobody that wanted to get up, or maybe one or two, and when they did get up, it was as a courtesy, uh, and there was not a whole lot to say, which tells me that the person didn't have much of a broadcast or of much influence ultimately for the people who were going to lay him to rest. Um, you know, I've also been to funerals that drew everyone to tears, that brought everyone to tears, that made people's lives change in some way or another, even at the moment of remembering what their loved one did in their life, what they um, contributed, to their families, to their community, to the world at large. You know, these are all things that have a very, very real impact. So the question is, why do people drift into lives that they never consciously choose? Why do people allow their life to become something they just follow instead of create? That's
Right.
a
So that is the fundamental question, I think, is whether we choose to be the author of our lives and therefore the author of our obituary, even though it may in fact be written by somebody else, or whether we just kind of passively try to survive over the course of our lifetime. And therefore, our obituary and the meaning of our lives is really created by circumstances or by other people or by situations over which we feel we have very little control. So I had the opportunity myself to actually write and present the obituary of some dear people, my parents, both my mother and my father upon their passing. And that was a powerful process because I really sought to capture what their lives meant and kind of what was the core meaning uh, of their existence over the course of their lifetime, what they contributed
Mhm.
to their communities, their families, their loved ones, and how they would want to have been remembered. And I think for all of us to think about that even before we get there, or maybe even before we're even that close. I mean, hopefully we have some runway before we arrive at the end. And
Yeah.
during that period of time, we can choose to actively influence uh, the content of that obituary for ourselves. and maybe even write it for ourselves. And that's part of what we're going to be thinking about today in this presentation for our little homework assignment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we want to avoid is allowing our legacy to be accidental. We want to be able to have intentionality to the point where we are actually making that determination consciously, on purpose, with volition, as opposed to allowing things to happen in our life that dictate its trajectory. We want to be able to have an active, intentional part, um, especially in the legacy we leave behind. Maybe not so much what people say about us, but more more so about how we impact the ones we leave behind. So let's take a look at having the obituary as a diagnostic tool for alignment, to align ourselves with um, everything that will bring our life experience to the surface for all to see and for all to benefit from. Even our mistakes. When we
Mm-hmm.
make a mistake and we learn from it, we actually teach people how to avoid the same mistake. But
Right,
if we deny that we ever made a mistake, what happens?
right.
We live in denial. What do you
Right,
think?
right, right. So I'm thinking, how do we want to be remembered? And if you ask yourself that question right now, I would like to be remembered as a psychotherapist and a philosopher and a writer who has contributed to some degree to the meaning and value of the lives of others. I mean, that I believe is one, at least, of the core purposes that I have in my lifetime. I mean, others would be, you know, playing a significant role in the raising of my children, playing a significant role in the well-being of my community, but mainly just in terms of the personal relationships that I have and the activities that I engage in as a psychotherapist and as a writer, that people's lives will have to some extent been positively affected by me and my activities and my interactions with them. I mean, that is sort of what what we call good karma and is part of our role here to see if we can contribute to the well-being of the world as a whole and the community as a whole and making this world a better place. However modestly we might be able to actually do that to have some effect in terms of making this world a somewhat better place. And I think that's how I think most of us would want to be remembered, right? I mean that,
I would think so.
yeah,
You know, I, if somebody wrote my obituary, would I be proud of it? Would I be glad for what was said? You know, I don't know so much about proud of it, but I know I would want people maybe to find something to laugh about, some funny things that happened, maybe some joy and how to claim that fulfillment in life, that seems to elude so many people. I think I want more than anything, I want people to know that life does not have to be as difficult as it's made out to be. That there is more joy in life than people may perceive, and there's more freedom, than we may realize. There's a lot more freedom, there's a lot more playfulness, there's a lot more joy, and it doesn't have to be as taxing as we make it out to be. You know, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about how liberating it can be to face that ultimate question. So don't go away. Stay with us.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorick, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorick has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And welcome back. The big question is, what happens once we're gone? We all want to be remembered in some way, at least a positive way. But Dr. Murphy, your thoughts on what remains after our body is ashes, after our body is buried or cremated?
You know, it's interesting. I was thinking about this very topic in preparation for our presentation today. And, you know, I can remember back when I was much younger, and I'm no longer young. The years go by. And so here we are, you know, and we're much closer to the end. Many of us boomers are, we're boomers. And so the whole generation of boomers is closer to the end than we are to the beginning. And you know, the midlife crisis is well behind us, and we'll be talking about those things later. But I sort of would think about and worry about death when I was much younger. Okay, so I'm in my 20s, say, and I'm worrying, gee, maybe I have some kind of disease or something wrong, and maybe I'll pass on. And it was very frightening to me. And I wondered later why that was so frightening. And it wasn't really the fear of dying itself. It was the fear of dying before I had actually lived. And so I understood by that when I had lived a life of some meaning and purpose, when I feel like I had contributed to the community, to my clients, to my family, to loved ones, to the world through writing books and things like that and teaching, I feel like I no longer felt like I needed to fear the end because I understood that I had lived a life. You know, and the key is to want, when it comes time for your obituary to be written, to actually have it contain elements that are of some significance in terms of the meaning and purpose of your life. So I do feel now, you know, many years having passed, that I have attempted to accomplish things. I've faced challenges. I've achieved things, and I failed to achieve things. I've achieved gains and losses, and relationships that ended sadly, and those that ended more happily. And so I've had a diversity of experiences, and so therefore the you know, the fear of death is much diminished, I think, because
Mhm.
you know we've done something. And I think we all find that if we're involved in truly meaningful work, then we realize that we're doing what we need to do. And we're in the process of creating an obituary, or what is left behind, what remains after we're gone, that will be of some positive significance and meaning for this world. So I think, you know, that's the key and the insight that I had as I considered this whole topic.
That's a beautiful thing to think about, you know, how we want to impact people and how we want to actually have that fulfillment in our life by the time it's over. You know, that it seems very real hearing you explain or described that fear of dying before you actually live. It reminds me, when I was young, I used to love acting, and I did a little bit of professional acting and amateur acting. And I remember wanting to make a good impression on the very first performance. The original performance for us was what people were going to remember and tell their friends about. Oh, you need to go and see this play, or you need to go watch these guys. They're awesome. They do this and they do that. And that sparked people to want to go and see it. Right now, what we're living right now is what people are going to remember. And there's not a second chance. There's not a second performance that we get to do to make up for what we didn't do in the original. Actors look at the reviews, they look at what people are saying now. Even chefs in good restaurants are always looking at the reviews to see what they can correct, what they can perfect, how they can improve, on what they're putting out. And I think if we did that for ourselves, if we wrote our own reviews, we wrote our own critiques with the same kindness and the same honesty, that we could actually correct the things that we don't like or the things that we think would be offensive or whatever in the same course of our lifetime. What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, this huge generation that is the boomers that we're a part of, and I guess there's something like 50 or 60 or 70 million of us left, I think, on the planet in the United States. We still have some runway left. I mean, there's some time to focus on what we want to have left behind. When we get to the end, I mean, how do we want to be remembered, and how do we want to have positively or in any way affected the world? And so I think that is the key, that we choose to take an active role in actually thinking about those issues and considering them and making decisions about how we want to use whatever remains of our time here. And that's sort of making a conscious effort to sort of look at the authorship of the obituary, like what words do we want it to contain? As the person who may deliver it, and it may be nobody at all. It may just be the world understanding that we are no longer a part of this world. Maybe we don't get the chance to have an obituary, uh, but still we have some way that our energy has become part of the whole. That beautiful poem, "The Bell Tolls for Thee." I don't know the whole thing, but basically, it speaks about how all of us uh, make some difference in this world, and our life has meaning and purpose and significance in many ways, of which we may be aware and we may not be aware. And the bell will toll for all of us eventually. And now, to have the courage to take the authorship and say, okay, I'm going to try to influence to the best of my ability, what
Mhm.
I can contribute, and what how this world will have been ever so subtly different in view of my participation in life.
Yeah, yeah. I one thing, if I feared anything, it would be being remiss in my life, not doing something that I could have done, or dying with potential that was not actualized. You
Right.
know, one thing I don't want is for somebody to say, "Oh, he had such great potential." It's so sad. You know, I want to be able to live out that potential to the fullest.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people think that their obituary is gonna be written from their intentions, their good intentions, what they wanted to happen, but it's not gonna be written that way. It's gonna be written by our patterns. It's gonna be written by the things that we actually, did that set off a chain of reactions and responses and impacted the world, a life of causation, hopefully positive causation in the world.
Right. One of the things I think that's interesting to consider is our heritage and how that influences our expectations, and therefore the role that we play in sort of forming our lives. The Irish nation has a troubled history, of course, even called the Troubles by the Irish people. And, lots of Irish people really looked at life in a negative way, filled with anxiety and fear. And, they're thinking that, oh man, how am I going to make it? How am I going to survive? And sort of the the tone of a lifetime was filled with anxiety and negativity to an unfortunate extent because um, we were not confident of the fact that we would be able to contribute something really
Hmm.
positively to our lives and to the community. So, I think that that expectation, we call it optimism, we call it pessimism, but the willingness to believe that we can do things and have that sense of self-affirmation and self-support really determines to a very significant extent, the quality of our lives and the quality of how we are appreciated by others for what we have contributed over the course of our lifetime. So I think that oftentimes you think about different cultures, the Italian versus the Irish versus the Germanic, there are different tones in terms of the expectation with regard to the quality of life, with regard to, we talked a little before our show about optimism and pessimism
Hmm.
and how the quality of optimism can really radically change the quality of our lives, just choosing to believe that things are going to be okay versus being preoccupied all the time or all too frequently by anxieties about loss or travail or struggles. So just the personal choice to believe in the positive value and to be grateful. Gratitude, I think, is
Yeah,
the fundamental attitude with regard to
for
this,
sure.
that people were grateful that we had been alive and that we were grateful for having the opportunity to live.
Mhm. So that's very intense thing you brought up, because if you compare the quality of life of a pessimist and an optimist side by side for a certain duration, the quality of life of the pessimist is going to be filled with negativity and uh, low vibration, lower quality. Whereas the pessimist is going to have a higher quality, higher vibration, high hope, joy, expectation. Even if they're wrong, they're living with all of that positivity in the same time frame that the pessimist is living. So it's a matter of choosing what quality of life do you want and making the determination from that. What do you think?
Well, we all, I think, know people who, one of the things you pointed out previously is the three pillars of intentional living. So
Yeah,
taking charge of the obituary by thinking about things in terms of clarity and courage and consistency. I mean, being willing to clearly say, I'm going to be the author of my life. I want to author my the story of my life. All of us essentially are writing the the novel of our lives, with our name on it, and it will go into the book of memories. I guess some people think, that everything is remembered ultimately, and there will be a tome somewhere in the cosmic library that will have our name on it. That that is a
mhm,
summary of all of our accomplishments and failures and struggles and achievements and the things that we have loved and the love that we have contributed and the loving gestures that we may have not been able to contribute, and that we have a clarity of vision about that, and we have the courage to make that choice to intentionally
yeah,
create that book, the book that is the story of our lives. And that requires the consistency, to get up every day and say, I'm going to be the author of my life today. I'm going to do what I can
When we come back, we're going to talk more about that because it's very important to understand how authorship impacts what people say about us. When we come back, don't go away.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
And welcome back. We are talking about consistency, coherence, and intentionality. You know, we often think that things are, and we're okay sometimes thinking that things are going to be done for us and that we don't have to be so intentional about everything. But the idea is that if we are not mindful about our decisions, some of those decisions will be made for us, and we will not allow. They will not necessarily be conducive to the things that we want in life or the outcomes that we want in life. You know, a lot of people have never even directed their own life, and they've been totally okay living at the effect end of the spectrum, you know, allowing things to happen. Maybe they happen to be resilient people, but nonetheless, you don't want to have to be resilient. You want to be at cause. Resilience is always going to be something that we want to increase and we want to benefit from. But the idea is that if we are not living with clarity, with courage and consistency, the quality of our life is going to be less than adequate. I would say. I think we're calling this the obituary, the backward design exercise, right, Dr. Murphy?
Yeah, so it's really if we don't choose to author our lives, then they will be written for us, right? So either the obituary will be an active process for us, or it will be a passive one, in which circumstances and other people seem to author uh, the story of our lives rather than us authoring it for ourselves. And I think that's very prominent in our society today. You see a lot of people who are sort of unhappy or resentful or feeling that somebody else is doing something wrong, and so they're not okay. Their life is not okay because of someone else's actions or behaviors. That's externalization, something that in
Right.
psychology we call projection. When we project onto the others that is the reason that I am not able to have the things that I want or achieve the goals that I want or have the happiness and relationships that I want. It's because of someone else or some other system. some other person, some other country, some some external circumstance. So really, authoring your own obituary involves reclaiming that power and saying, no, I'm going to author that. And we've talked in the past about Man's Search for Meaning, the great book in which the author really described, even in the most extreme circumstance of being in a concentration camp during World War II with horrible circumstances, he was able to be the author of his own life and contribute meaningfully to the lives of others and create a really meaningful situation that served others as well as himself
Yeah.
um, in the context that was really, really extraordinarily challenging. So
Yeah.
stepping up to the challenge really is really, stepping up to the challenge of authorship of our lives is really the key and central issue, I think, in seeking to influence and to some extent determine and enrich, the contents of our obituary that will eventually evolve.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl said that uh, in his studies, that he assessed that the ones most likely to uh, thrive despite being in those extreme conditions, like in a concentration camp, are
Right.
the ones most likely to survive are the ones that have meaning and purpose in the future. And for him, it involved having other people in his life, a community of like minded people to share successes with, to share intentions with, their dreams and plans with, having something in the future that is detailed out, with intention. That's what gives meaning to our life. And if we take that and decide, well, we're going to re-engineer our habits and our relationships, so that we have all of the things that are required to get the alignment, both the somatic and the spiritual alignment in our life, so that our life has that meaning in it. The body is designed to signal us when it's misaligned, when something's missing or something is askew. And our intuition guides us. It allows us to take that into consideration and fix it, um, you know, as we move through life. And those things are also key in allowing us to create the legacy that we want. The question that stops people in their track: does the life I'm living now match the life that I want remembered when I'm not here anymore? So that's something to reflect on, something to think about. Where are you in your life? Are you living someone else's script, or are you the author of your own life?
That's absolutely, I think, the fundamental question that all of us need to ask. One of the things that we were talking about, I think, is having some kind of ritual whereby we engage in a systematic way in that piece of self-examination, which
Mhm.
really involves when we go to bed, say, or take a few minutes before we go to bed or as we lie in bed and think, how was this day? What did we do this day to really contribute to our legacy and to make our legacy meaningful in terms of our own lives and the lives of other people? So, what did we do? And go over your day. I mean, try to refilter your day and remember all of the activities that you engaged in and do a little mini assessment of the significance and value of the choices that you made in that day and the actions that you engaged in that day, and see if that was congruent with the fundamental purpose that you want your life to have.
Yeah.
And stepping up to that obligation is just a huge, huge step of that's called self-actualization. When you
Yeah.
do that and you have a set of ideas or concepts or even fantasies as to how you would
Mhm.
like your life to be, and then actually examining each day how you feel like the actual behavior you engaged in on that day is congruent or is not congruent with that fundamental purpose that you feel for yourself. So, I think
Mhm.
all of us face those choices each day. And I think, that's the excitement of life. And we really respect people, I think, who we understand are doing that, right? We see people who are
Mhm.
making those hard choices. They're actually, stepping up and engaging in taking on the challenges that they believe are most meaningful with regard to their lives.
Right, right. I remember doing things as a kid, that challenging things. When we'd go on vacation, we used to go there was a campsite that we used to go camping at, and there was a section in the campsite where they had trampolines that you could jump on, and I used to love jumping as high as I could and doing a somersault, and I remember trying to do a double somersault, and I remember what I had to do with my body, how I had to move my body to be able to get 2 somersaults in before I hit the ground. And even though every time I missed it, every time I felt short of doing what I wanted to do, I was excited about trying it again. And life is not different, so much different, because every time we make a mistake in our life, the challenge of perfecting it is exciting. It gets your adrenaline, it gets your blood pumping, and it gives you that ambition, to pursue what is challenging. And even if we fall short, to live with that excitement about how we can correct things that we weren't able to achieve, you know, I think that is a thrill worth having it in our life. You know, it just kinda guides us and it kinda directs us about how we can improve for tomorrow if we didn't accomplish it today.
Yeah, that sort of brings forward, I think, Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now.
Yes, it
And the
does.
remarkable thing that we can
Oh,
understand if we choose to face it is that we have the opportunity and we have the power to determine our intentions and our behavior and our thoughts and the nature of our being now. Even if we're going to be executed at dawn, it's sort of the semi-sarcastic example, we're fine until the bullets start flying. We can
right,
be okay if we maintain our own internal state of calmness and peace and eh, gratitude and appreciation um, in the now. And yeah, Eckhart Tolle really gained his lots of his insights from the Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome and
right,
Greece, and
true.
their understanding that really what you need to do is to understand that we do retain that power. Even if we come up short, we win some, we lose some challenges we may face and not be able to uh, successfully resolve. Um, but even if there are losses and failures in our lives, that nonetheless, as long as we are in the now, we have the power to be present and to make those moments as meaningful as they can possibly be. And sort of facing that challenge and really allowing ourselves to step forward into the present in the
Yeah.
most meaningful way that we can is the
You
key.
That reminds me of a movie I saw, and I forget who wrote the movie, but I think it was called The Boy in Striped Pajamas. Do you remember a movie like that? About a concentration camp.
Not me, yeah.
It may have even characterized, Viktor Frankl, but as the guy there was a kid that was in a concentration camp, and he saw his dad there being hauled off by the guards to be killed. But the dad, knowing his son was watching him, he put on a performance like a clown, and as the guards were pushing him, he performed like a clown, making his son laugh to his own death, and it was such a remarkable scene. We're gonna talk more about things like that as when we come back, and some things that you can do to begin living your obituary on purpose. Don't go away.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
And welcome back. We just want you to know that your obituary is not a future document. It's a present invitation for you to live in such a way that when the time comes, you don't have to exaggerate, or the one who's reading your obituary will not have to exaggerate. So we have prepared something for you, but before we do that, if you liked what you've been listening to so far, please be sure to like and subscribe, write some comments, get our attention so that we can continue to provide more content like this for you. So here is our call to action. We are inviting all of you to create 5 sentences that will help you in creating and living your obituary. And this is called the 5-sentence obituary prompt. So the first sentence, you want to write a sentence about who you were at your core. So describe the kind of person you were, your character, your presence, and the way people felt when you were around, when they were around you. What's the next one, Dr. Murphy?
The next one is to share how you loved and showed up for others. So this kind of really heightens, I think, and emphasizes how the quality of the obituary is going to be really manifested in the influence that we have on other people, on loved ones, on our communities, on our world, on nature, whatever we have done to improve or contribute to our world, how we loved and showed up for others. So knowing how to love and what is love, and really defining what we believe love to be, and what does it mean to have a loving relationship, you know, and what does it mean to experience love from others and be grateful for the love that we have received. So I think that's the second part. And part of that is the third one as well, which is clarifying our purpose. You know, what is the work and the purpose that we want to engage in for us to be able to establish a meaningful life? And the way that we describe this is to capture the impact that we have made through our gifts, our work, our calling, and the difference that we have made. And the key, I think, with regard to this is that each of us has something that's very different in terms of our ability to contribute. It really is unique to us, and that is that we give that which we uniquely have the ability to offer. And every one of us is different. And so knowing ourselves is a part of authoring our obituary, because we need to be aware of those qualities or those actions, those behaviors, that form of love that we have to offer the world uniquely, and only us, because our love, our gifts will be unique and different from anyone else's. And that's the task that we really face, I think, in terms of authoring and creating this process, I think. And what do you
Right.
think about the next one, Coach Mike?
So, yeah. So for getting back to sentence number 2, how you loved and show up for others. The way you're going to write that is you're going to write how you consistently treated people closest to you in your family, your friendships, and your community. Okay. Now, for sentence number 3, the work, purpose, or contribution that defined you. What you want to do with this sentence is capture the impact that you made through your gifts, your work, your calling, the difference only you could make, as Dr. Murphy just mentioned. Now, go ahead and read sentence number 4, Dr. Murphy, and the prompt with it, if you can.
Right. So this one addresses one that I think is really great that all of us face so much, and this is the challenges that we had to overcome in order to create the growth for ourselves and to create the possibility for the contribution that we have to make to the world. So this is the challenges. All of us, I mean, people call it in family therapy, they call it the family crucible. All of us were born somewhere into a certain situation that
Yeah,
typically was filled with opportunities as well as obstacles and struggles. And so, really looking at that, examining our lives and seeing how we have persevered and perhaps even transcended the obstacles that we faced in order to achieve a life for ourselves
yeah,
is part of this sentence. You know, describing those obstacles, overcoming them, giving ourselves the affirmation that we need to acknowledge our resilience and our courage in creating the transformation that we had to make in order to live the full lives that only we have the capacity to live.
yeah. So, sentence number 5, the legacy that you leave behind. You want to write the lasting imprint that you left on the world, your stories, your values, and the lessons that people will carry forward because of you. You know, I'm going to also challenge you to make a shift in your life this week, bringing it into real time. Identify one specific action that you will take this week that aligns your current life with the obituary that you just wrote. One shift that moves you closer to the person that you want remembered. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again next week, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. Thank you, Dr. Murphy.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you, and thank you all for watching and listening.
This has been Snippets of Wisdom with host Dr. Mike Corral and Dr. Michael J. Murphy. Tune in and learn about the primary issues facing our society today and find the best chance of securing a stable and prosperous future. Snippets of Wisdom will enrich your life and the lives of all of your loved ones.